Is this what fairness looks like? A 76-year-old woman skipping dinner to afford heating? A retired miner in Barnsley taxed on the pension he broke his back to earn? Millions of pensioners dragged into income tax, not because they earn more, but because the government froze the rules. And no one told them. This is Britain under Keir Starmer. A country where the people who built the system are now quietly paying to keep it afloat. Welcome to the age of the stealth tax, where no tax rate was raised, but everyone is paying more. And the most shocking part? It was planned. Before we go deeper into this scandal, the stories, the lies, the hidden numbers, I need something from you. Share this video. Tag someone with elderly parents. Comment below. Fairness means protection, not punishment. Let's break the silence together. Because trust me, they're counting on you not understanding this. But when you do, the whole system starts to crack. In July 2024, Britain elected a new government. Keir Starmer's Labour swept into power with a promise of renewal. A break from Tory austerity. A focus on working people. A country governed by fairness. And in his first weeks, Starmer told the press, "We'll deliver stability without punishing those who've done their bit. This is a government of responsibility." But beneath the slogans, something else was happening. The government made a quiet but powerful decision. They chose to keep income tax thresholds frozen. No adjustment for inflation. No protection for the vulnerable. This meant as wages and pensions rose slightly with inflation, more and more people were pushed into paying income tax. Not because they were rich, but because the line never moved. The UK's personal tax allowance, the amount you can earn before paying income tax, has been frozen at £12,570 since 2021. With inflation over 6% in some years, this freeze is actually a tax rise in disguise. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, IFS, calls it one of the most significant stealth tax rises in modern UK history. And it's hitting pensioners hard. Because for the first time in history, millions of retirees are crossing that frozen line, not because their standard of living improved, but because the government refused to adjust. In 2023, 8 million pensioners paid no income tax. By 2025, that number dropped to just over 6 million. And if the freeze continues, the majority of pensioners will be taxed by 2027. Let that sink in. They didn't raise your tax rate. They just moved the goalposts, or rather, refused to move them, while the world changed around you. And they hoped you wouldn't notice. No headlines. No parliament debate. No warning letters. Just quiet deductions from already tight pensions. And a vague feeling of confusion and betrayal. Because what kind of government taxes pensioners harder during a cost of living crisis? Answer: a government that needs money and thinks you won't fight back. They didn't raise the income tax. They didn't change the pension rules. They didn't even make a big announcement. And yet, the millions of Britons are now paying more tax than ever before. This isn't magic. It's a mechanism. And it has a name: threshold freezing. Let's pull back the curtain. Because understanding how this stealth tax works is the first step to defeating it. Every worker and pensioner in the UK is allowed to earn a certain amount before they start paying income tax. This is called the personal allowance, and as of now, it's stuck at £12,570. In normal times, that allowance rises every year to keep up with inflation. But not anymore. Since 2021, that threshold has been frozen. And under Labour, it's staying frozen until at least 2028. Let's say you're a pensioner earning £12,000 in 2021, no tax paid. Now, thanks to inflation and the triple lock on pensions, your income has risen to £13,000 by 2025. But the tax threshold stayed frozen at £12,570. Which means now you're paying tax. Not because you earned more in real terms, but because the threshold didn't move. This is how a stealth tax works. You don't see it coming. You don't see it announced. but you feel it in your bank account every month. According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, and the Institute for Fiscal Studies, IFS, by 2028, the stealth tax will drag 4 million more people into income tax. The Treasury will raise an extra £50 billion over 5 years without changing a single tax rate. More than 7 million pensioners will be taxed on their pensions for the first time. And it's not just pensioners. Nurses, postal workers, teachers, part-time workers. Anyone whose earnings just cross the frozen line becomes a quiet contributor to the government's hidden revenue. Let's be fair. This didn't start with Keir Starmer. The freeze began in 2021 under Rishi Sunak, then Chancellor under Boris Johnson. It was meant to be temporary, a post-COVID emergency measure to balance the books. But once the Treasury realized how effective it was, how quietly it drained billions, the freeze was extended again and again. Then came Labour. And instead of reversing it, they embraced it. Not only did Starmer keep the freeze, he refused to even debate it publicly. No change. No reform. No warning. And the longer it stays frozen, the more people fall into the trap. Labour knows this tax is unpopular. But they also know something else. It's too profitable to cancel. Scrapping the freeze would cost the government £12 to £15 billion per year. That's money they've already factored into their budget. Money they need to fund public services, repay debt, and avoid raising other taxes. In a leaked internal Labour policy memo, one line stood out. Threshold freeze is a high-efficiency, low-noise revenue strategy. Translation? It works, and most voters don't understand it. This is a trick used by politicians across party lines. Avoid direct tax hikes, which make headlines. Use fiscal drag, letting inflation pull more people into taxation. Blame economic forces, not government decisions. It's not a bug in the system. It's the system. And Labour, the so-called party of the people, has now weaponized it fully. Starmer doesn't need to say, "I raised your taxes." He just doesn't raise the thresholds and lets the numbers do the dirty work. This isn't just a financial issue. It's a democratic issue. Because if the government can raise billions in taxes, affect millions of lives, and do all that without debate, then we're not really living in a transparent democracy anymore. We're living in a managed illusion where policy hides behind complexity and accountability disappears. The threshold freeze equals a tax rise. It hits the poorest and oldest first. It's a deliberate strategy, not an accident. Labour chose to continue it. They could have stopped it. They chose not to. And now, pensioners are paying the price. It's easy to talk about numbers. £12,570 frozen. Millions taxed. Billions raised. But behind every statistic is a person. A mother. A grandfather. A widow. And for them, the stealth tax is not some economic theory. It's a letter they didn't understand. It's a deduction they couldn't explain. It's a fear they couldn't shake. Margaret, 76, lives in a modest bungalow in Lancashire. She worked 40 years as a librarian. Never earned more than £19,000 a year. She paid into her pension, saved carefully, never asked the state for help. But last year, she received a letter. You may now be liable for income tax. Her pension had risen slightly, thanks to the triple lock, just enough to cross the frozen threshold. Now, she pays around £300 a year in tax. It may not sound like much, she says. But it's 2 weeks' worth of food. It's heating in February. She tried calling HMRC. They told me it's automatic. That's it. No explanation. Harold, 82, spent 35 years as a coal miner in South Yorkshire. He receives a combined pension of just over £13,000. He's never used a smartphone. Doesn't understand pay. But suddenly, in 2024, he noticed his monthly income had dropped by £26. They said it's tax, he told his local newspaper. Tax? On what? I'm retired. His daughter checked the numbers. The problem? The tax-free allowance hadn't moved. But inflation did. And now, a man who built Britain from beneath the soil is being squeezed above ground. Aisha is 61. She works part-time in a school canteen in Birmingham, earning just under £14,000 a year. She never expected to be rich. But she never expected to be taxed as if she were. Last year, I paid £0 in income tax. Now it's over £200. That's 3 weeks of groceries. Or her winter electricity bill. She spoke to her union rep, who told her. It's the threshold freeze. Everyone's feeling it. But not everyone is paying equally. My manager makes £48,000. She's paying a higher rate, sure, but percentage-wise, I've lost more of my pay than she has. These aren't rare cases. They're everywhere. According to the Office for National Statistics, ONS, more than 1.2 million pensioners have been dragged into income tax since the threshold freeze began. By 2028, the average low-income earner will lose £500 to £600 per year due to frozen thresholds. 20% of those affected don't even realize they're paying extra tax. That last point is crucial. Because this tax works by confusion. By silence. By complexity. It's designed to be invisible to the people it hurts most. Let's look beyond the individual. If a pensioner like Margaret is losing £300, then across 2 million similar cases, that's £600 million quietly taken from retirement incomes. That's less money for grandchildren's birthday presents, home repairs, local economies, donations to charity. The government takes from those who would spend to protect a budget that benefits those who hoard. This isn't just a tax shift. It's a generational betrayal. There's a dangerous narrative being pushed, in some media, and even from certain politicians. Pensioners have it easy. They get triple lock protection. They're asset-rich. But that's not the full picture. 1 in 5 UK pensioners lives in poverty. More than 2 million rely entirely on the basic state pension. The average pensioner income, after tax, is below £15,000. Yes, some are comfortable. But millions are not. And now they're being asked to pay more tax to help fix a problem they didn't cause. Beyond the money, there's the shame. Many older people grew up believing, if I do things right, I'll be secure. Now, they feel punished. Not just financially, but morally. Margaret cries when she opens her tax letter. Harold won't turn on his heating past 8 p.m. Aisha skips lunch to save for Christmas. They are being squeezed. And blamed for noticing. There's no one speaking for them. Not in Parliament. Not on the BBC. Not even from major charities. Just a growing silence. And growing fear. This is what happens when policy becomes too technical to resist. When citizens are left alone to figure out a system designed to confuse. And it's exactly what the Treasury is counting on. You've heard the stories. You've seen the numbers. You understand the mechanism. And now comes the most disturbing question of all. Where is everyone? Where are the MPs? The journalists? The unions? The charities? Why is there so little outrage over a policy that quietly taxes the poorest and oldest in Britain? The answer lies not in a conspiracy, but in a culture of cowardice and convenience. You'd think that a tax hitting pensioners and low-wage earners during a cost-of-living crisis would spark a political firestorm. But inside Westminster? Silence. The Conservatives started the freeze. Labour continued it. The Liberal Democrats? Rarely mention it. Even SNP MPs, outspoken on welfare, avoid direct confrontation over threshold policies. Why? Because no major party wants to lose access to that hidden £12 to £15 billion a year. It's money without political cost. Money without a vote. And most importantly, money without headlines. Now what about the press? Surely Britain's proud newspapers would shine a light on this injustice? Not quite. There's the occasional report from the Telegraph, Express, or iNews. But no consistent coverage. No front-page scandal. No hard-hitting documentary. Why? Because stealth taxes are boring, at least to newsroom editors. They're technical. They're gradual. They're not photogenic. It's easier to report on culture wars than tax codes. And when pensioners complain, they're too often dismissed as comfortable boomers who should be grateful they even get a pension. A narrative pushed by both media pundits and social media echo chambers. You might expect organizations like Age UK or Citizens Advice to be shouting from the rooftops. Some are, quietly. Age UK has published brief statements calling for pensioner tax reform. A few MPs have cited those reports in committee. But no full-scale campaign. No media push. No marches, no billboards, no political pressure. Why? Because many of these organizations rely on government grants, cross-party access, neutral positioning, and taking a strong stance on taxation policy? That's risky business in Westminster. So instead, they publish PDFs. They issue polite press releases. And the injustice continues. Then there's us, the people. The ones who should be marching in the streets. But we're not. And here's why. Most people don't understand the freeze. Many think it's just part of inflation. Some believe it's their fault they're paying more. A 2024 poll by YouGov found 57% of Britons didn't know tax thresholds were frozen. Of those who did, only 22% understood what that meant for their income. This is the power of technical injustice. When tax becomes a riddle, the public stops asking questions. Let's call this what it is. A strategy of weaponized complexity. Governments, from both left and right, have learned a crucial lesson. If you want to raise money without protest, make the method so boring, so technical, so confusing, that no one will notice. This is what the stealth tax is built on. Frozen thresholds. Changing inflation rates. Quiet deductions. Confusing letters. No vote. No soundbite. And in that fog, truth disappears. Follow the money. The ones who gain from stealth taxes are Treasury ministers who avoid bad press, chancellors who meet fiscal rules without raising taxes, politicians who claim to protect pensions while taxing them, governments that promise no tax hikes and deliver exactly that in disguise. It's not just a policy. It's a performance. And unless we expose the silence, they'll keep performing it. We don't need everyone to shout. We just need enough people to understand. Because here's the truth they're scared of. Knowledge spreads. Anger follows. And pressure works. Every great policy shift in history, from pension reform to tax justice, started with people refusing to accept complexity as an excuse. And that's where we are now. At a moment where the silence can either continue or collapse. It's up to us. At this point, you might be asking, if this tax is so unfair, why doesn't the government just end it? Why doesn't Labour scrap the threshold freeze? Why doesn't Starmer raise the allowance, protect pensioners, and deliver the fairness he promised? The answer is simple and devastating. They can't afford to. Because the stealth tax is no longer a policy. It's a pillar holding up the entire budget. By keeping income tax thresholds frozen, the government is raising over £12 billion per year. Without any parliamentary vote. Without any media backlash. Without most voters noticing. That's more than the government spends on prisons and policing combined. All local council support grants. Core maintenance of roads and transport. In other words, the stealth tax isn't a side strategy. It's a central funding stream. And any government, Labour or Conservative, would struggle to replace it overnight. Let's not forget how Starmer came to power. He promised no tax rises for working people. No wealth tax. No unfunded spending. Economic credibility above all. Which means no bold borrowing. No major giveaways. No tax cuts unless offset. This gave Labour no room to maneuver. And so, when it came time to find extra money, the easiest choice was the one voters didn't notice. Keep the Tory tax freeze. Blame the previous government. Hope inflation does the rest. It's cynical. It's strategic. And it works. Here's the danger. The longer the freeze continues, the more people are pulled into tax. The harder it becomes to unfreeze without a huge revenue loss. The more pensioners are trapped paying tax in retirement. And reversing it in the future would require either raising other taxes, making deep spending cuts, or borrowing more, which Labour has ruled out. It's a self-reinforcing trap. And every year that passes, the cost of fairness grows higher. Let's say tomorrow, Keir Starmer wants to raise the personal allowance to reflect inflation. He'd face immediate problems. The Treasury shortfall, a £15 billion hole in the budget. Market pressure, investors watching for fiscal credibility. Media backlash, accusations of backtracking on stability. Internal Labour friction, competing priorities like NHS funding, education, defence. So what happens? The issue gets kicked down the road. Another year of freeze. Another generation dragged into tax. Another £12 billion silently taken. And by then? The next Chancellor will say, "We can't change it now, it's too late." This is the brutal irony. The stealth tax was introduced in the name of stability. But now, it's creating instability in people's lives. Margaret's heating bill. Harold's food choices. Aisha's monthly budget. All quietly eroded to keep a line on a spreadsheet looking clean. That's not fiscal responsibility. That's moral failure. Fixing this won't be easy. But it's possible. A fair government could link tax thresholds to inflation automatically, as was once the norm. Introduce a graduated pension tax exemption, protecting lower earners. Replace stealth taxes with transparent, progressive alternatives, like wealth taxes or corporate windfall levies. Require parliamentary approval for threshold freezes, not just backroom decisions. But all of that requires political courage. The kind that puts people before politics. And truth before spin. It's working exactly as intended. The government gets its money. The media stays quiet. The public stays confused. And the pain gets spread just thin enough to avoid revolt. But that's not stability. That's stagnation. And it's breaking people. This story began with a simple question. Is this fairness? Now, after everything we've uncovered, the mechanics, the silence, the suffering, the strategy, we face a bigger question. What kind of country do we want to be? Because this isn't just about tax. It's about identity. It's about values. It's about who we protect and who we punish when times are hard. There was a time when Britain promised its people, work hard and you'll earn a pension. Save for the future and you'll be safe. Pay your taxes and you'll be looked after. It wasn't a perfect system. But it was a deal. A covenant between citizen and state. Today, that covenant is broken. Millions of people, pensioners, part-time workers, Carers are now being taxed not because they're wealthy, but because governments chose silence over honesty. Don't let them tell you. There's no alternative. We had no choice. Everyone must contribute. Because the truth is, they had other options. They could have taxed windfall profits, closed offshore loopholes, reformed capital gains to match income tax rates, cut back on political waste and corporate handouts. But instead, they chose the easy target, you. The invisible majority. Too polite to shout. Too tired to march. Too trusting to suspect betrayal. You can't talk about fairness while taxing a widow's pension, while freezing thresholds in silence, while letting the richest avoid scrutiny. Keir Starmer stood on a platform of fairness, decency, responsibility. But when the test came, he froze the same thresholds. He took the same quiet billions. He left the most vulnerable to pay for mistakes they didn't make. This isn't fairness. This is failure, rebranded. Imagine a Britain where no one pays tax on a basic state pension. All tax thresholds automatically rise with inflation. Pensioners are protected, not punished, by the system they funded. Budget holes are filled with transparency, not tricks. This is possible. But only if we stop accepting excuses and start demanding answers. This is not just a call to outrage. It's a call to action. Because here's the truth. The most powerful thing in Britain today is a voter who understands how they are being taxed. Email your MP, ask them to support inflation-linked thresholds. Demand answers. Share this video, get the facts to as many people as possible. Use your voice, online, offline, in your community. Support reform campaigns like the Tax Justice Network or Age UK's pension fairness initiatives. Vote with clarity, don't be fooled by slogans. Ask for specifics. They're counting on your confusion. Don't give it to them. To the pensioners watching this. To the carers, the canteen workers, the bus drivers. We see you. We hear you. And we will not let this injustice stay hidden. You built this country. And now, it owes you more than silence. We still have a choice. We can be a country of quiet cruelty or bold compassion. A country where tax is hidden or tax is honest. A country where policy punishes the weak or protects them. And that choice begins right now. Share this video. Comment, no more stealth taxes. Speak to your MP. Demand justice for our pensioners. Because if we don't act now, the next letter, the next deduction, the next betrayal could be yours. Fairness means protection, not punishment. Choose the Britain you believe in.